Meeting of the town. Thank you. I'm calling to order the June 26th meeting of the Town Council Study Committee meeting. So I'll read through the script. The script for remotely conducted or hybrid open meetings. Members of the public wishing to participate in the meeting must use their full name for Zoom access. If full names are not used, people will not be allowed to participate in the discussion. The town and the committee will reserve the right to remove any member of the public from the meeting who doesn't use a full name or acts inappropriately. We are using Zoom for this meeting, which allows for the public to participate in the meeting as an attendee. Attendees should join in listening mode. They can click their raise hand button if they wish to speak or ask a question. I will call on those who have raised their hands, hopefully in the order in which they were raised. All questions should be directed through the chair. As a preliminary matter, this is Joe Grouse. I'm chair of the Town Council Study Committee. Permit me to confirm that all members and persons anticipated on the agenda are present and can hear me. So members, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Jill?
Okay, here.
Donna, welcome in person.
Thank you. Here.
Curtis?
Here.
Let's see. Are there any other members on the? Nope. Okay. Jeff? Here. Bo? Yeah. Rachel?
Yeah.
Joe's here. Okay. There are no members of the staff. Anticipated speakers on the agenda, that would be the folks from the Collins Center. Anthony, could I ask you to just confirm that you're all here?
The team is all here.
Great, thank you. Good afternoon. This open meeting of the Town Council Study Committee is being conducted remotely pursuant to Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2023. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. This meeting will feature the opportunity for the public to ask questions if they are on the Zoom link. For this meeting, we are operating in a hybrid fashion via both in-person and Zoom. Please note that the meeting is being recorded and that all attendees and that some attendees are participating by video conference. Accordingly, please be aware that other folks may be able to see you and to take care not to screen share your computer. Anything that you broadcast may be captured by the recording. Any and all supporting materials that have been provided by members of the body are available or will be available on the town's website if there's anything new today. The public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda unless I have any other notes to add to that agenda. Let's see. We're going to turn to the first item on the agenda. Before we do so, permit me to cover some ground rules for effective and clear conduct of our business and to ensure accurate meeting minutes. I will introduce each speaker on the agenda. After they conclude any remarks, the chair will go down the members of the committee, inviting each to ask any questions. And please hold until your name is called. Further, please remember to mute your phone or computer when you're not speaking. Please remember to speak clearly and in a way that helps generate accurate meeting minutes. Okay. And then finally, each vote taken in this meeting will be conducted by roll call vote. So, hey, Jeremy.
Yeah.
Did everybody? I'm a little confused. Did everybody get the meeting agenda or not? So we have. So we got a little problem in terms of, since you haven't seen it, it was posted on the website in advance. Let me just, I'll tell you what the agenda items are so that everybody knows, okay? Besides the call to order, we have the acceptance of the agenda, the announcement that the meeting is being recorded. I had on here approval of minutes of prior meetings, but Kelly got me the meeting minutes about 45 minutes ago, so we will hold that until the next time. And then we really have three parts of the agenda that will involve our discussion today. The first section is about a 15-minute review of any comments or suggestions that you all have on the PowerPoint that I distributed 2 weeks ago. I brought additional copies, so if people want them, we can look at them. I will have a few announcements. We did Caroline and Curtis and I did participate in a public outreach session on Saturday with the Nantucket Civic League. So I'll tell you a little bit about that. I thought we would brainstorm a little bit on other ways that we might generate some public outreach and communicate to the voters what we're up to. And then I'm going to leave the last 90 minutes of the time allotted to the Collins Center, who are going to take us through a sort of a draft work plan of how we can go through creating a town council charter, and move forward with that part of our responsibilities. So I'm going to leave that to Anthony in about 20 to 30 minutes. And then obviously, as we tend to do, if there are members of the public that have questions during our discussion, we'll do that during the presentation. So can I have a motion to accept the agenda?
So move.
Second.
Jill?
Aye.
Curtis?
Aye.
Caroline?
Aye.
Jeff? Aye. Bo? Rachel?
Aye.
Joe? Aye. All right. Alrighty. Just a few other announcements about public outreach. As I mentioned, Curtis and Caroline and I were invited and participated in the President's Breakfast of the Nantucket Civic League this past Saturday. I went through an earlier version of this presentation. Candidly, I was not the best presentation I've ever given, but we got through it. And I think we had actually a couple of good questions in terms of, are there going to be precincts? And, some people had some specific questions. A couple of the members of the Civic League asked questions that clearly indicated they were opposed to the idea of Lee Saperstein and Rick Atherton. I think both had, well, Rick's was for it, but I actually thought it was pretty good. We had some good questions, and we were invited to another homeowners association to give a presentation. So I thought that was generally a positive session. I don't know if either of you have a comment.
Well, I was curious, what way did you think the forwarded one from Rick Atherton was expressing
Well, I can't,
specific opposition?
well, because I assume he's opposed, and I can't remember what he asked, but I don't think it was sort of a supportive
zoning.
question.
It was about zoning, and would the town councilors have the ability, would they become the zoning authority?
And I think I answered yes, didn't I?
I think we were a little bit confused about how that would go, and in fact, he asked me that question about a month ago to bring it in here, and I asked it of the Collins Center, and I couldn't remember. Do you remember?
Yes.
It can go either way.
Well, you
Make it up.
You refer to a zoning advisory board, they bring back a recommendation, then the council acts on the recommendation. Typical way of having all FinCom, zoning, planning in a town council model. That to me is a simple answer.
Right, I mean, the
Yeah,
town council is going to be the legislative body, and they're going to have the responsibility to make decisions on these sort of issues.
they're gonna send stuff out. People are gonna have committee meetings. They're gonna argue, discuss, and then come back to the council and the council votes. All the way through. That's the model.
Yeah, and I think I heard that as, I mean, that is the big thing people will be grappling with is, oh, wow, legislative power goes from this body, it goes over here, and that body doesn't have it anymore. And that's the biggest nut of it all.
What do you mean that body doesn't have it anymore? That body doesn't exist.
The voters, well, I guess they still do in the sense that they're electing, the voters who are the legislative body now become the voters of the town councilors. And then they no longer have the voting power over the issues per se.
Right, but I'm just saying, since town meeting goes away, then they don't have that anymore. But the planning board, the way I thought it would work is the planning board is gonna take these things on and they'll forward it or not, but a citizen can probably push through their own spot
It'll
zoning if they
still be
wanted to.
coming back to the legislature for final action. All your
Yes,
zoning comes
yes,
to the
I understand that.
legislature now, so
But-
ultimately it'll.
But all zoning goes to planning now. So,
Well, that's a question that we have to address.
Yeah, I think that's part of what we're going to put the next 6 months. Anthony, you got your hand raised, so I'll.
I think you actually were already getting there. This is this would be in the legislative function, and we're going to get to that eventually. We've got the work plan to discuss at some point later. But it is something that will be discussed as you guys build the charter out.
Okay, that's what I thought you were going to say. But to get back to Caroline's comment, I think that is least the people that I've spoken to around town, and one, I had a chance to ride on the ferry over with a member of town government on Tuesday, yesterday, and the opinion of this individual was, you know, the real problem is people aren't gonna want to give up their vote. I mean, they're gonna see that as sort of this, you know, responsibility and right that they've had, and the people like open town meeting are gonna fight to keep their vote, I think. I mean,
And the people who think that it's inefficient are gonna vote their feeling and making it more efficient.
hopefully we will create more of those people than the former people.
Well, so maybe a good way of looking at it is that our group, our committee is looking at this so closely for other people. We're doing it for other people, so they don't have to do it. And that it's up to us to tell the story in a way that reveals and motivates people to see that there's a different option that is better and better for them. Just like for me, I mean, I'm a good example because I was a devotee of town meeting, having been to 4 of them and thinking they were really cool, and seeing all the good things that they do. And so it took, I had to go through the process of all these conversations and learning about it to see that there is, there may be more good things about town council. So I had to find the story of that to
Become
learn,
disciple.
well, to learn why it's good.
Yeah.
So,
I get back to what I've been trying to say all along. Is you need to have a problem statement and what this solves for. And so in many ways, you're all touching on the same thing. Everyone's gonna have a myriad of different points that they care about. Not everyone's gonna be the same. But I think it's incumbent on this group to ultimately sell whatever you want, or what you come up with. You've got to sell it. So you got to convince people in some form of deliverable that there is a problem or a series of problems, and this solves that. I keep getting back to that. It's like selling anything.
No, you've been pretty consistent, Jeremy. I like to think that we've actually incorporated that, you know, that sort of problem solving into this deck and into some of the other conversations we've had, but. Jill,
Yeah, I don't disagree with what you're saying, Jeremy, but at the same time, people are gonna support or not support this just for their own personal reasons. It's not like we have to have this one problem we're trying to solve. There's actually a lot of problems that we're trying to solve, and people are just gonna come to their own conclusions about it. And I don't think we have to come out and say town meeting's been a disaster. I mean, that's not true. And I don't think that's what we want to tell them. We're saying we think we can offer you something better than what you have, and that you will get a more responsive. I don't want to say more responsive government. That's not quite what I mean, but you're gonna get a process that you can move through probably a little bit more understandably, right? And a little bit more consistently. You know, before the select board votes on something, we kind of know how that's gonna go before that happens, you know, and that's probably what would happen in this format too. Town meeting, you have no idea, none.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of chaos in that.
The other thing I want to let people know is, I think some of you may remember that I was interviewed by Nantucket Current, a couple weeks ago for a little article about town meeting. And now N Magazine is doing an article on, town council versus open town meeting, a guy named Brian Bouchard, I think.
Yeah, he's
Is that-
one of their writers.
So anyway, I've had a couple of chats with him. I don't exactly know when that article is coming out, but I do know that he actually spoke to the folks at the Barnstable town council meeting.
Well, good. Finally, somebody did.
Barnstable, so.
good.
He used to work for the.
He ought to come sit in one of the, well, maybe he can watch us on Zoom.
I actually invited him to come by this afternoon, so, one other housekeeping. I think I sent this around to everybody. This is the dates for our meetings through October.
October,
Did
yep.
everybody get this?
Yep, on my calendar.
Okay, so everybody on your calendars, okay.
Joe, one final question. The visit you had with the civic group.
Yeah.
Away from the one concern on zoning, what was the general tenor or takeaway that people had?
say people were generally interested. I mean, I didn't, you know, this one fellow, Lee Sacristan, who some of us know, and
He's a
been part of the
long-time
open
friend.
town meeting for a million years. I mean, he actually said, I think, you know, I oppose it or whatever. I mean, but most people who asked questions or came up and chatted with us before and after, I think they were kind of open-minded and, you know, why might this be a good idea? How is this going to be better than? The one thing I didn't know about the group that was there is how many were actually full-time residents versus summer people. Because I think that the reason a lot of these homeowners associations run their meetings in the summers, because a lot of their residents aren't in the winter.
Yeah.
But I thought it was a good step and people seem receptive to it.
They were way more interested in what the police chief had to say, and they asked her many, many, many questions. They had like 2 questions and then that was it.
She was very good.
She's great and we're lucky to have her.
Okay. You know, I had hoped to sort of talk about this, but if people haven't had a chance to look at it, can I ask that everybody, I will send this electronically. But anybody who thinks they might be in a position to go talk to an outside group or over the next several months, I would just like to have a deck that is, you know, we're sort of all comfortable that this is the story. This is more or less, you know, not that it can't be tweaked or changed, but you know, if we get an invitation to go speak at some event, you know, we know we're going to use something.
Is this the final one?
Well, this is the most recent one. I
Okay.
thought the one that I did on Saturday, I thought it was a little too long. It needed page numbers. I got a little lost as I was delivering it. And so I tried to make it shorter, put page numbers in, and hopefully just a little more, you know, straightforward to deliver.
Joe, are you going to like have maybe one person assigned to find out what the committees are, who would like to speak at those committees? So we kind of cover as many committees as possible. Rather,
You mean homeowners association?
whatever, yeah.
Well-
Or is it just like pick and choose, or
Well, no, I haven't thought about that, Donna, but I mean, I think, you know,
it might be good to organize something so that somebody's in charge and say, okay, here's a list of associations that we should address. And then we have your presentation, and then we are assigned to go out and do. I don't know.
That list is in the town registers on page 2 of, there are 32 of them. And
you're talking homeowners associations, right, Kurt?
yeah, on the street list has that list. I think I sent it to you. I can send it to everyone else. For example, I'm going to do the Tom Nevers group, which is Randy Ringer. But I was also told that a number of these groups sort of merge, like there may be 3 or 4 in an area and they sort of combine. But that list with your 2 chairs is in the street list.
Well, I would love if somebody would be willing to kind of, you know, kind of keep a record of who we've spoken to, as well as come up with other organizations we should speak to. I'm looking at you, Donna, if you're sort of willing to think about it.
I will, but I would like some direction since I'm not as familiar, maybe as most of you
Well,
are
because-
with,
Because it seems to me like.
But I'd be
you
happy
know,
to
the
do it.
Rotary, or there are other civic groups on the island that
Yeah.
we might.
Curtis would
And
be
they very
helpful.
often are looking for people to come
I've
talk
already
to their
been doing it,
lunches
so
or their
I'll
meetings.
join. I'll work.
okay, Curtis, it will work with me on it. Yes, I'd be happy to.
But you
And that
know,
way we
like
know what's
Rotary is a
covered.
good example, but we need to have our proposal before we go to Rotary, I
Well,
think,
that's
rather than
it.
just talking.
I think that's it though, Curtis. Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
Sounds like this we're talking about the next agenda item, public outreach thing, but, so I don't know if this is helpful, I don't wanna take up a lot of time. I went through my notes and then I made, if you condensed it, I don't know if this is.
Well, if you've got notes on it, I'm happy to take it.
Well, that's
instead
what
of-
I'm asking, instead of going through it in the group and taking up time, I don't know, I just found a few things that we had talked about at various meetings that might not have been part of it, and maybe they are, so.
I would
I don't
love
know if you wanna take
That-
that
to
and
hear-
then just. Maybe
Well,
send out a new version.
I'm happy to be the editor of this, and, you know, any edits or changes or suggestions, I'll blend them in. Sorry, go ahead. Caroline, you look
I
like-
feel that it would be very helpful for the group to hear about people's different feedback. If this is gonna be our PR statement, and obviously it'll change when we put, you know, as we go along, but isn't this the work of the group, is to talk about what the mechanics are in there? So, I mean, I would be
Well,
interested.
yes,
to
I'm
hear-
just saying, instead of taking up a lot of time and going through each one, I don't know if it's helpful. I just made some very chicken scratch kind of notes, if you wanna look at it, and I don't know if that's a different version, so I don't
Well,
wanna.
could you
spend
give
a
us
lot
a
of time.
couple of examples? Could you give us a
Well,
couple of examples?
I mean, if they're beyond, if they're typos, we don't need to talk
No,
about
no,
it.
no,
I don't think they're typos.
I don't care.
Joe, may I make a suggestion?
Sure.
Could we, do you want to take time now to go over them? Or would you rather do it at another meeting and then we can discuss changes and so forth?
Donna, I had sort of thought we would, but clearly not everybody's has seen, nobody's seen this latest version. So why don't you can take a paper copy.
That'd be great.
I don't know if I've got enough for everybody, but I will send out an electronic version when I get home.
I read both and they're not materially different.
No, they're not. I mean, I
Oh,
just sort of shifted some
Yeah.
Yeah.
pages
True.
around, trying to make it a
Okay.
little shorter.
Could you give an example, one example, just because I'm curious what kind of things you might have found?
Well, again, they don't have to be incorporated.
Your thoughts?
Just like on where this data came from. Where it said the positives about open town meeting, one thing that was mentioned is that sometimes the first time when people hear topics that are going before the town, they don't pay attention to every select board agenda and things like that they're going through. Where a council, you might need to be more vigilant on topics and what they're voting on. Where most people just wait till town meeting and the vote, I didn't know if that should have been added. Going back to like what Jill mentioned, everybody has their own personal reason and some people don't feel that the need to speed up the process is required, so I didn't know if we should add that. They like to have the extended time for public review and more time to weigh in. On what's the problem, there's a bunch of different bullets on this one under like OTM is slow and cumbersome. 1 or 2 meetings a year, but I added the prep time that goes into it, the cost of additional meetings for the town. The location. Right now, the location's an issue, so if you want more people to attend town meeting, we don't have a location for that anywhere on Nantucket, so that's part of the problem for participation. You're asking voters to be experts on a wide variety of subjects. I didn't see, and I know that some people don't, I should say some people don't care, but there is a portion of the community that does, and there's a portion that says, oh, well, but the non-voting has, a little bit of a limited avenue of participation with open town meeting, where with the council, they have a lot more avenues. Not everyone is comfortable speaking on town meeting floor, so people might just be silenced and intimidated, where they might be more inclined to speak before a council. Articles of a non-binding nature consume a lot of time and resources. That has been something that was mentioned a few times by other members. And I think there's a lot of confusion on voters of what is binding or not. So there's a lot of time that minor things get debated and a lot of time that major things get debated. And sometimes people say, well, that passed at town meeting. Why is nobody doing anything about it? And it's because it wasn't binding. So that's kind of a challenge of town meeting, is to figure that out. And then with the hot topics, we talked about how a lot of times, I mean, you sort of mentioned it with the attendance, but a lot of times the room gets stacked, so to speak. I don't think that's the way to say it, but, and then for those who are for or against a topic, and then there's a massive flood out. I didn't know how to kind of incorporate that. One of the things that was on here was regular attendees to OTM are older, wealthier, and not representative of the island's population. I also added, we see the same attendees all the time for open town meeting, but I just put a question mark on the wealthier. How do we know that?
You know,
So I just thought
I
maybe that was a little
I sort of,
misleading.
I was making a little bit of a, I actually think part of that, I'm sorry, Kathleen, go ahead. I'm interrupting you.
I should have raised my hand. I think all those are really, really good and really important, and I think it paints a materially different picture. And when I was giving you my feedback, it's quite a bit of overlap there. I That's why I did, because I think it is persuasive for people. Oh, yeah, these are the things. And I think that grabs on to people and that's what we want. So I very much agree.
Yeah, no, I like a lot of the ways you frame things. Joe?
I just wanna. Listen to her just jogged my memory about this, but you might want to put in here that more people turn out at the ballot than they do at town meeting. I think that's, so we know there is a level of participation greater than the one we're getting at town meeting. And that's on the municipal ballot, and then, of course, the November ballot too.
Jay.
Go for it.
Last one.
Joe, do we have the statistics on that?
Yeah,
They're-
the clerk has that.
Yeah, but we could put that into this.
Oh, you mean the ballot? Yeah, I've got all that.
Because it's a powerful argument.
I've got all that. It's basically 3 times as many people vote as the
Yeah.
town meeting.
Sometimes it's 4,500 people that voted in the November ballot, but even the municipal ballot's like 1,700 sometimes.
The space issue that you brought up, that is one. That. And logistical.
That was horrible this year. That was horrible.
Very plain in the logistics.
Those people in the gym couldn't be heard. I mean, it wasn't right.
It changed the democratic process of our town meeting, that one example.
Well, just cast doubt,
All right,
which wasn't good.
So it made me vote the opposite of what I wanted to vote. Because I was confused. And I was sitting right in the room. I was,
well, could I ask, I would like to sort of move along and turn the session over to Anthony and the folks from the Collins Center. Could I ask everybody if you just kind of go through it? If you have other thoughts, shoot me an email. I will do my best to sort of blend them in, and then we can take some time to talk about it again at a future meeting.
I didn't touch on that page.
Okay.
Again, feel free to discard anything.
Well, that's very helpful, Rachel. Thank you. I think this
Well, the
was
advantages,
worthwhile.
there's a few also of the advantages that I think were, again. I don't want to take, I don't want to take time.
Again, I appreciate the time you took. Any other thoughts people have?
Yeah,
Oh,
so if I'm gonna talk to like the builders association. Probably want like that is still. Cut and dry, hard hitting.
Mhm.
If I go there. they're
That's a great
like,
group to be
"I don't wanna
talking to."
Yeah, I don't wanna be here, what do you got?
okay.
And 3 minutes, yeah.
I spoke to Steve Rocky, so I think we're gonna be able to get on the agenda there in the fall. He basically said summer's not a good time for them, but yeah.
Well, that may-
I mean, they're just gonna wanna know the nuts and bolts anyway. They're not gonna do this whole why and philosophical discussion.
Well,
You're not
I-
gonna have that at that. They're gonna be like, how many people does it serve? When is it, you know?
But I also think as we go through the process of framing out, and fleshing out the charter, there's gonna be more to talk about, because you're gonna be able to say, well, you know, there are, I don't know, 11 counselors, or whatever we decide, but some of the other specifics, I think, will be of interest to some of these groups.
Well, were you at the builders when I reported last time?
You wanna go?
No, you and I can do it, but I already did at the last meeting, just said, hey, we're working on this and it's important to you because it's going to give a voice to a lot of people.
Let's do.
No, you're going to be better than me. I'll let you do it.
can you give us, can you give
Good
us a
idea.
thumbnail when you have it? Because that will be good for the Builders Association and cocktail parties. They all want to hear us, like, give me the like nut of it.
I just, we've gotta come up with what it is.
Need the elevator speech.
Yeah,
Yeah. But we've got to come up with what it is. Again, I would just want to target voters, so I don't care about these other groups you're talking to. If they can't vote, I actually don't.
The other thing
Here?
I think we should consider candidly is, I'll call it a monthly report that we send to the current or the Inky, and basically say, you know, this month we've discussed I don't know, today I think we're talking about the executive function of a town, but I just think if we could send a 4-paragraph summary of what we've discussed over the last couple of meetings periodically, it's just going to keep the subject out in front of the voters. And,
Yep.
you know,
Oh, I agree.
hopefully get, you know, people to realize that this process is moving along.
That's a good idea.
At the Civic Association, you said at one point, somebody asked a question, you said, well, this is the Joe Grouse plan, and you were being funny, you were trying to insert some humor.
Embarrassed.
Well, but no, it was a humorous thing, but just the soundbite of that, like, I think we really, when we're speaking, just like you're saying, obviously, it's the committee, this is what the committee is doing, it's no one of us, it's.
Okay, well, clearly it'll be very helpful if we get this boiled down to something that anytime we have a public opportunity to speak to the public or a group, we've got a standard.
That's
Okay,
great. Thank you
All
for
right.
doing it.
all righty. Anthony, where are you?
Hello, good to see everybody again. So, well, first, as I start, Joe, I'm gonna share my screen, but were the work plan and the generic charter circulated to the committee?
No. Does this look familiar to people?
No.
All right, then I think the answer is no. Sorry about that, Anthony. Can you,
We have a variety of documents that we're going to share after this meeting. So I'll include that in those to be distributed to the entire committee. What I'll do is I'll share screen right now. And the first item that I'm going to share is, I have so many things open to make sure I share the right one. So we drafted a work plan for the committee, and this is, I guess, a couple things about the work plan. It's optimistic in sort of the timeline, and so we've got sort of basically the fastest that we believe this process could go, and sort of we've generically sort of laid out some of the areas that we'd cover, and I'm going to show what we call the generic charter in a second, but some of the areas that we'll cover sort of based on articles that would traditionally be in a charter. So based on some of the conversations that we've heard over the last couple meetings, we're going to start really with this meeting with discussing the executive branch. We're anticipating that would take 2 meetings, the legislative branch at the end of the summer. You'll understand this more, the other elected and appointed officials, August, September. And again, those will be circulated and so on and so forth. What I want to draw the committee's attention to specifically is public input. There are 2 locations on this draft work plan for public input. Here at the sort of the beginning of the fall, in the wintertime, and again, on this very optimistic timeline, we are anticipating the sort of charter to be drafted in January of next year. Again, I think this is very optimistic. I would tell the committee, don't sort of anticipate that you will be ending in January. It probably will go longer. But these places for public input are important, and we put them in there specifically because in these different locations in time, the committee will have basically portions of the charter that it believes are I don't want to say done, but their ideas solidified in terms of these areas of the charter: the executive, the legislative, other appointed officials. And this is an opportunity for the public to share those with the public, get the public's feedback, and to potentially discuss. We will be talking about, in our up and coming meetings, resident participation, financial provision, so on and so forth. So it's a place, so these are specific places in time for meetings dedicated to this dialogue with the public, because what we found is successful in these types of endeavors is to almost have the public as a sort of another member of the committee. They're another voice. They don't necessarily override other voices, but it's important to have their input. They may ask you or may say things at a meeting that may cause you to go back and change something about the executive or legislative branch. And again, this is an optimistic timeline. There could be more public input if the committee, wishes it. And this is just one channel of public input. So the things that you guys were discussing a few minutes ago about articles in the paper, online surveys, things of that nature, those are also other important channels, but there should be a meeting or meetings dedicated to having the public come in and participate. Curtis, I believe I saw your hand up.
This timeline suggests that we are not going to try to make this for the ATM in 25. You're telling me that the deadline for us to submit, unless the select board accepts it later, is November. And so this timeline just says, hey guys, we're not even gonna do this year. Is that the intention?
again, we put this timeline based on our experience with other committees, so based on where you're starting now, this is what we would anticipate. Again, this is optimistically what we'd anticipate you to take, the time the committee would take to form a charter.
Anthony, what are the pain points that cause delay usually in all these components?
So this is, well, that's a sort of a varied question. I mean, it's gonna be coming to, so the next thing in this that we're gonna talk about today is we're gonna bring up the executive branch, and we've got a generic charter which sort of talks about sort of the specific areas that these different articles in your charter would cover. And I frame those sort of as questions to the group. What do you want? Let's say we're going to talk about. I know there was a discussion about, do we want a mayor or a town administrator? What if we choose a mayor? What do we want the term to be? What do we want their appointment authority to be? What do we want to happen if there's absences? So there's a number of areas that could cause extended debate on the body, and there are areas that once the public hears about it, and I think you do want the public to hear about these decisions earlier than later, where the public may have feedback that may make you go back and rethink some areas that you have come to some sort of decisions on. And Mel, if you want to chime in.
Well, right now, what the committee really needs to consider in the next couple of meetings is whether there would be a mayor or a manager, and that would be a pain point. If you could not make a decision there, I think that would hold up the process, because the rest of the drafting would be dependent upon which executive you select.
And I don't know if there's other questions. I'm putting this before you to see if, again, this is, I think this work plan will probably be modified as we go along, but I'm putting this before you. Is this a process that you want to take? Do you want to rearrange things? How would the committee like to sort of move forward? And this may be a lot I understand everybody has not seen this until today. So, but that was sort of the question to put to the committee.
Carolyn,
Well, this is all based on meeting every other week.
Right.
That's what we had, right, Anthony? You based this on twice a month meetings?
Correct.
So, we obviously have the option to double our meetings so that we
Yeah.
can get it done in time for.
I mean, there's that. There's kind of, we need some experience as to how quick we actually do go through this. I mean, I've always thought that if we sort of copy or transfer over the way that the current open town meeting town of Nantucket charter is structured, that some of those answers already exist. I don't really know that since we haven't gone through it. But I should also share, I mean, I don't know about any of you, but I've gotten a few hints from town administration that the warrant for town meeting 25 is going to be chock full of sort of big issues. And I got the distinct impression I was being told this to, from the perspective of, well, I sure hope you don't think that you're going to get onto the, have an issue as big as converting to town council when they've got all these other big things on the agenda. I'm not saying we have to take that hint, but that's the hint that's what I was getting.
I've heard the same thing, but our issue isn't a financial issue, and theirs is the one they're talking about. So I'm not worried about that personally. If you guys want to plow ahead and work quicker, but.
All right. I mean, I think we ought to just plow ahead and.
I agree.
And in a couple of months, we'll know whether, are we making enough progress to make an October deadline? Anthony and his colleagues would tell us probably not, but maybe we will.
I'll meet more often if y'all want to.
I'm happy to. What do you think?
I would say too, is solid progress also may be encouragement for this select board to say, we'll put it on and get more time that way. It was an article adopted at town meeting to do this.
That's
So
right.
there is some will to put it on. Well, again, if the select board wants to sponsor that for the public to discuss, that's.
And there's stuff.
In the progress.
Right. And their stuff changes. I mean, they were supposed to have something on for special town meeting this fall and they pulled that. Now it's just all about something else. So,
All right, so then I'm reading the group. Let's just charge ahead and then we'll know better where we are in 3 or 4 months. Yeah, there.
I'm also thinking about our last the town the government study committee, which was a robust one. And we had John Brusher come speak to us. You were on that committee. I think maybe other people were. And as I'm recalling, that stalled because you couldn't figure out about how to do the representatives or how to
It
place
wasn't our
them.
charge.
Okay. But sometimes the pace of something it helps the deliverable. And if you go too slow, people will get exhausted by it. I mean, look at the STR.
I agree.
mean, it's just,
I agree.
All right.
I'm happy to go to more meetings.
Yeah, if you
Let's-
want to do that.
Why don't we get going on this and then, I mean, I'm happy to meet more often. I just. Use the summertime.
We might not have the same sticking points that he's saying. He's just suggesting based on his experience. So like when he talked with the executive branch, I don't think we're gonna have that same sticking point.
Tricia, sorry, your hand is up, so go for it.
Thank you. I just have a question for you. Your warrant closes in November for your May town meeting.
Yeah,
Yes.
isn't that dumb?
Put it in the reasons. Put it down. Put it in the slate.
Well,
I'm not going to comment on that, but I am going to ask, do you just need to have the item on the warrant by November, or do you need to have the wording of the item? For example, I don't
Wording.
think.
You have to. have
What
the
about your
wording.
budget? What about your budget?
They can do, the select board does that and they can do that whenever they want. They're
Okay.
different. They can add in things through till the very end. In fact, we
Well,
vote on
and
things the
and-
night before.
And that
But-
could be, I mean, if we can convince the select board to submit the article, we may buy ourselves whatever it is,
Right.
3 or 4 or 5 months, so,
Right,
Speak
that
to
just
it.
seems a little, I'm sorry, a little early for something like this. But as you said, maybe the process will be able to be having the item on the warrant without the specific language.
Well,
That-
but that is a different process than what we're talking about. And maybe we as a group should decide that. Because I don't know that the select board is gonna take this up as their own. I don't have any indication that they will, to be honest, and they might, hey, how's it going? Come on in. And I don't know if they will or not, so we can't count on that.
sorry, but
How we closed that last time, has to inquire and get some direction on whether they would sponsor it if we made progress or if we were going with citizens deadline.
I've been I'm trying to get in to see Libby just so to do a
Yeah.
catch up, so I will. When I get that set, she's like, family emergency, since. Are we done? Anthony, let me turn it back to you.
So if I can distill that to conversation, it sounds like you may have more meetings, but this order in terms of going through the charter in terms of makes sense to everyone, or do they want to start in a different order?
No, I like
That
it.
makes sense.
I think we're happy to trust your judgment on this.
Okay. So now the next thing I'm going to just pull up on my screen, and I'm going to turn it over to Pat, is the what we call the generic charter. This is just and specifically Article 3 of the generic charter, which is the executive branch, which is what we're going to talk about today. And again, the way I like to sort of frame this and think about this is these are the questions that you'll be answering about these sections. When you're talking about the sticking points, these are, you can sort of think of these as the decision points that we will then wrap the legal, the legalistic charter language around. But I'll turn it over to Pat to sort of explain this section generally and the issues. And then Mel will talk about, what we had heard was people wanted to talk about the differences between mayor and manager. And so Mel's going to get into those differences after Pat explained the section that we're in, where all of these decisions would find their home.
Thank you, Anthony. This is, Anthony, maybe you can scroll back to the top just so we can show them the overview of where this sits in the charter. We're calling this a generic model, but what this really is the outline of a charter. The numbers may not be the same. Some of the sections may be omitted, some things may be added, but we're just,
Pat, sorry to interrupt. There's no there's no,
Oh, there's no
indent.
table of contents in
there's
this
no
one? That's
table.
okay. That's okay. So there will be different articles and you'll get a copy of this. So if you have a question about something, say you want to talk about recalls, you'll see what article that is in. So you know when to hold your, where we're going to be in the process and where to ask questions. So today, I just want to give you a bit of an overview about the executive branch article. The first major decision that you're going to have to make is whether you choose a town manager or a mayor as the head of your executive branch. That is going to impact all of the other decisions that we make along the way. And Mel is going to outline for you some of the factors for you to consider in that choice. So once you make that decision, we'll be starting out section 3.1. Just a quick overview. That's just going to be, what are your qualifications going to be? How are these people going to be appointed? What's the term of office? How is compensation going to be fixed? There might be something in this about, if it's a mayor, are they prohibited from holding other public offices? So that's going to be the basic, how is this person get in office? Section 2, section 3.2, executive powers, that will talk generally about what the executive branch has authority for, which will be enforcement of the laws, implementation of ordinances and orders, supervision of town departments and agencies. If, for example, you have a mayor who is automatically on the school committee, any ex officio roles will be defined in this section 3.2. And I'm just going through this quickly because you will get a copy and we may or may not get to any of the specific issues today. But we want you to have a roadmap of where you're going so that you can understand where you're at. Next, appointments by town manager or the mayor. We will begin to talk about which positions are appointed by the town mayor or the town manager or mayor. For example, department heads, members of committees and bodies, whether the town manager can delegate this appointment to a department head, and certain timeframes for filling certain vacancies. Section 3.4, temporary appointments to town offices. What happens when there's a vacancy? How is that going to be filled in? And that will be different whether it's a town manager or a mayor. Section 3.5, communications and special meetings. This is a section that's more frequently being added, and that is, how are we going to, and should we put in the charter some information about how the council and the executive exchange information, what sort of transparency is involved, who can call a meeting of the town council, and how to call a special meeting. Okay. The next section, approval of town manager, mayor, veto. Generally, this will talk about which town council actions require either approval or action or a veto and override. In general, with a town manager, there's usually not a veto process. And with the mayor, there may be a veto process, and we'll talk about what majority is needed to override a mayoral veto. Section 3.7 talks about what do we do when the town manager or the mayor is absent temporarily. Oftentimes there's a protocol in place where the town manager or the mayor can appoint someone to act in their short temporary absence. Section 3.8, delegation of authority, is generally a statement saying that the town manager or mayor can delegate certain responsibilities to certain members of, certain members. It's, there are not a lot of decisions to be made in this, but it's a statement in there that will just talk about who can be authorized to perform certain certain functions of the executive position. Section 3.9 talks about a permanent vacancy and how to handle it. Do we need a special election in the event of a vacant mayor position? Is there a certain time limit for appointing a town manager, a new town manager in the event of a full-time, permanent vacancy? It talks about whether somebody can step up in an acting capacity, for example, an acting town manager, while someone else is being appointed to the full-time permanent position. So that will be an issue for you to talk about process. Most of these things are generally fairly standard across cities and towns, but all the crux of the whole issue will start with whether you decide to go forward with a town manager or a mayor. So I'll let Mel get into some of the differences between those. But let me just ask you first if you have any questions about this part. I know you're just seeing it today, but I'm just happy to take any of your questions.
Go for it.
Yes, I have a question. Is there any way to compare the Nantucket's existing charter with what you're suggesting so that we could speed up the process, take a look at what we have and where you think we're going with what other towns have been using?
We absolutely can. And Mel is going to be going through with you under the different forms of government compared to what Nantucket's doing right now. So that's exactly some of the comparisons that Mel is going to be making for you next. That only gives us limited help, because if you're talking about a change of government to a council form of government, there's not going to be an exact match. We may be able to translate things like terms or how you replace, now how do you handle if there's a vacancy in the town manager position?
Right.
We can very much look at that and see, is that working for you? If that's working for you, we can continue in that same vein. But there may be differences just as a result of it being a different form of government.
I would assume so, but I think it might be helpful and I think it might help convince people also, if we take what we have that's working and then apply to this or vice versa.
Absolutely. And we will give you, generally what we do as we get a little more information where you've made some of the big decisions, we can give you draft language with decision points. So for example, once you make a decision, what will the term be? What will happen? And we'll give you decision points and language to consider. But right now we're looking at a broad overview because we have to answer some basic questions first.
Okay. Do you have a question, Bill?
Yeah, I noticed that this outline of the workflow that we're gonna do is based on the charters on the outline of the different sections, so executive branch, legislative branch. So our charter basically, and this is boilerplate for all of them, so just divide it out.
Oh, okay.
And you can look at our charter and say, okay, this is town managers. Well, it's pretty
John,
Oh, I'm sorry, Jeremy.
maybe this is for Anthony, but I wondered if you had a thumbnail sketch of the benefits between a town manager and an elected mayor? Because that seems to me the next decision point this group needs to make is which pathway to go down.
I think that's the next part of the conversation. I think Mel, isn't that Mel, are you up?
Yes.
Yes, I'm ready.
Now, do you want me to share screen or are you sharing your stuff?
No, would you mind, Anthony?
Sure.
Maybe you could just put that framework up first. I'm not going to address it too much, but I do want to, since that question was just raised, I will show that, but we won't spend a lot of time on that. It's just that framework for considering the mayor and manager forms. If you could just show that document.
I'm putting it up
So
now.
we have a distributed, or this is a Collins Center document. And this is something that we want to, we've provided to you. And it will give you a lot of thoughts about mayor versus manager. I'm not going to go into this in detail because what I've done is created another document that does, as was suggested, compare Nantucket's existing charter with how a council manager form works, Barnstable in particular, and then also how a mayor form works. And we use the town of Agawam, which was a community that we're familiar with and we've worked with in the past. So why don't we put up that comparison, and I will probably get into a lot of the questions that you're going to be asking.
And just so the group knows, we're going to send you all of this information after this meeting. I know that it's kind of a lot to see in one go.
The first thing I want to do is just explain to you that you have a modern charter. Nantucket currently has a charter. It's a very good charter. It's modern. It's relatively new, and it has a lot of best practices in there. So I want to let you know that we're not just throwing it out. In fact, I think we want to use as much as possible of the charter, depending on how the committee decides how it wants to go forward. I think in particular, the executive section of the charter, especially the town manager part, will remain very similar, I think, in a council manager form. There won't be a select board any longer, but there will be a town administrator, and that town administrator will be appointed and reports to the council in a very similar fashion as the manager currently reports to the select board. So I think that's the good news. You'll get into all the details. We'll actually draft charter language for you and show you where some of the discretion is from where you currently are. But I think the good news is that at least in the executive section of this charter, it will feel comfortable to you how the town manager works in a council manager format. The mayor is really totally different. I mean, I think that's one where you'll have to go through that other document, but as I go through this example, you will begin to see how the executive functions in different ways. So let's start with the authority, first of all. The authority in the case of the current charter shares the executive function between the town manager and the select board. So I believe in your charter, there's Articles 3 and 4. Select board 3, the town manager is the Article 4. And we would consolidate those because there won't be a select board any longer. There will be just from the executive branch, it will just be the town manager. So now that doesn't mean to say that the town manager won't share some authority with the council. They will, and you'll see that. But the executive function will only be the town manager going forward, or a mayor. There will be no longer a select board. So the selection of the executive officer, pretty standard. An appointed town manager is almost always in a charter based on qualifications. There has to be a certain level of qualifications. In Nantucket, currently, the charter requires that the term of office cannot exceed 3 years at a time. It can be renewed, of course, but each term of office cannot exceed 3 years. And your charter also requires that the town manager be a resident of the town within 6 months of appointment. In the council form, again, the town manager is appointed instead of by the select board, it's by the town council. Again, there usually are qualifications language in the charter. In Nantucket, in Barnstable, there isn't a term limit. In other words, the term of office can be greater than 3 years. It's silent on that. It's really dependent on negotiations. And Barnstable also requires their town manager to be a resident of the town within 6 months, unless that period is extended by the council. Now, residency can be a big issue in communities. I'm guessing that in Nantucket, it's probably different. And there's an assumption that the town manager probably has to live on the island in order to be an effective town manager, but that is within your discretion. Now, obviously, a mayor is a resident of the town because there has to be a voting, a resident, a voting person, registered voter of the town, and they're elected by a majority of votes cast at a local election, usually for a term of 2 years. Could be another, could be 4, but typically they're 2 years, and in Agawam it's 2 years. Before I go forward, any questions about the authority of the selection of the executive in these forms?
Carolyn?
What kind of issues come up that you're referring to about residents?
Competitiveness, whether that's a reasonable requirement in order to attract a suitable group of candidates. Usually that's the issue. Is this a for example, in Eastern Massachusetts, in the Boston area, the towns are really very easy. The borders are very close to one another, and it's not really an issue. My guess is it would be an issue if you had an emergency and someone had to figure a way how to get over to the island from their residence. It's not an issue in Greater Boston because it takes 15-20 minutes. Sometimes it takes quicker to get from one town to another than it does to get from one place in one town to another. So those are the issues generally.
Mel, are mayors, in terms of sort of authority and, I don't know, administrative power, more powerful than town managers or town administrators? I know that our Libby Gibson, the town manager here, and I think is considered in Massachusetts a fairly strong town manager, strong in air quotes. Are mayors even stronger than that?
Absolutely. That's a good, I think, good segue to the next topic, which is, the executive administrative responsibilities and so on. But let me first say that just the basis of who the accountability there, the town manager is appointed by a select board or a council, and they may be removed by the select board or council, depending on the situation. Whereas a mayor can only be removed by probably a recall if there is such a provision in the charter. So clearly the mayor is accountable to the public, which often means it's very hard for them to lose their office, and but they have to worry about getting reelected, of course. But in the mayor also has a veto over council actions. You'll never hear about that in an appointed manager. No such thing exists. So mayor is a very powerful position. Quite often, the appointments of the mayor are not subject to approval or ratification by the council, whereas almost always, in most cases, the town manager's appointments either have to be approved by the council, or at least they are given an opportunity to reject those appointments. So there's a lot of power in a mayor. It's really a different animal. I would have to say, the way I would look at it is in a council manager form, it's the council, that's where the power base is. It's true that the town manager has a lot of administrative and some executive authority, but it's really the council that controls things, because the council appoints the manager. They establish some goals and objectives for the manager. They evaluate the manager. None of that exists with a mayor. Hopefully the mayor has a good relationship with the council, but at the end of the day, the mayor does not have to play ball with the council. The other thing is political issues. So typically, town managers are professionals and do not, in fact, many belong to an organization that prohibits partisan activity. The International City Management Association, there's a code of ethics. And so a lot of us belong to that. And so whereas the mayor is a very political animal, probably affiliated with one of the parties, even though that's not how they'll run in Nantucket. There's nonpartisan elections locally, but they'll be a bigger player, I think, politically. And a lot of communities like that and like the ability for the mayor to, speak to the governor or legislators. There's a more symbiotic relationship on the elected side than it is with the town manager. So that's another issue that can play.
I assume Mel, I assume that's part of the reason why, the communities that have mayors tend to be the biggest in terms of population, because they've got, sort of more political structure and more local politics going on than smaller communities.
Yeah, I mean, clearly, many big cities have mayors, although many don't. Worcester and Cambridge, for example, have council manager, as well as Lowell. So there's some pretty big communities that don't have mayors.
Okay, thanks.
Let's just move on to, just a little bit more on the executive administrative. So currently in the Charter of Nantucket, the select board appoints the manager, they appoint the town council, and they appoint all the boards and committees of the town. They also get to disapprove of the town manager's appointment of department heads. That's sort of a veto provision. The board approves contracts, collective bargaining agreements negotiated by the town manager. And as all you know, there's a special provision in your charter that the select board can acquire real estate under certain circumstances. We would try to, extend some of those checks and balances, if you will, in the council manager form. And also the budget, which is the next one, the town manager prepares and submits the budget to the select board, ultimately to the finance committee and town meeting. It would be very similar in actually both mayor as well as council manager. It's always the executive that prepares the budget, but it gets appropriated by someone else. And I don't know about, I would assume the mayor has some veto power in the budget as well. Vacancies and positions. So I think Pat mentioned there's provisions in the charter about vacancies. In a town manager, really there's an obligation to fill those vacancies as soon as possible. First temporarily, perhaps, and then permanently. That's in both the case of the town as well as the council manager. In a mayor, there is a provision when there's a sudden vacancy in the mayor. I believe there's a temporary mayor usually built into the charter, but then there's a special election that must be called. So there is no other way to appoint a permanent mayor, as far as I know. Perhaps there is other provisions, but usually it's an election. And then the final veto of legislative actions. Clearly, there's none when there's appointed person, but the mayor does usually have a veto. Now, that veto can be overridden by certain supermajority, depending on the issue. But so these are some of the issues that we want to bring to your attention. We encourage you to look at that sheet that looks at specifically the mayor versus the manager. But I think the question or the point was asked was correct. It's really a fundamental decision that needs to be made before we can go too far into the process.
Mel, and I think so, Mel, you're done, right?
Yes.
So we want to turn over to discussion with you. There's one other thing that we do want to bring to your attention, due to the uniqueness of Nantucket as a single municipality and also being a county. And let me just pull that up quickly. So while I'm pulling things up, Nantucket is the only community in Massachusetts that is a county and a municipality. Other places, there are a number of municipalities that make up a county, and then County government, for the most part, was abolished in Massachusetts, but there are, I think, 8 other counties in the state, and they have a separate county government. Nantucket has a county government, which is unique, and we bring it up as you're going through the charter. You just want to keep in mind that your town officials have responsibilities at the county level. So, for example, sort of mirroring the document that you just saw, your county administrator, actually, I'll start in the middle here, county commissioners. So by default, your select board members are the legislative body of your county. That's Nantucket County. And if you go to your county administrator, the town administrator is by default the the executive authority in the county government. Or, in theory, the county commissioners could appoint someone else. And I will send this to you. I'm not going to go through this in detail, but I've sort of laid out the various responsibilities that people have at the county. So again, it's a little unique in that your executive authority for the town, being the select board, functions as a legislative body at the council level. I'm sorry, at the county level. And then your town administrator becomes the county administrator or the executive of the county. And then several other county offices, the town subsumes several other county positions. So for example, this is language pulled directly from the county charter, which is an addendum, or I pull it down as an addendum to your town charter. It basically says any county office that is mirrored at the town level, the town shall function in that as that office. And it specifically calls out the county, the finance department, the treasurer, the town clerk is the county clerk, the town council is the county council, and maps those over directly. Also, there are some county functions like sheriff, register of deeds, some other things that the county charter specifically sort of exempts and says, prior to the adoption of this charter, this charter will not impact the election or the function of those offices. We can circulate the charter, but your existing county charter basically exempts those offices, says nothing in this charter will modify how they're elected or what their job duties are. So what we would suggest going forward is that to the extent that your modifications to town government will then be modified at the county level, that we just be aware of that and that we mirror those as in a modified county charter document, and that we leave other things, if they're functioning, alone. And you may want to, one of the other things we've discussed is that as you're looking at these positions like town administrator, town manager, to bring them in and talk about what they do and specifically understand what that means for the county of Nantucket as well, so that you don't have some unintended consequences as you make these modifications going forward. So I'll stop there, and we are turning it over to you guys to have some questions or perhaps discussion on, and this is a lot of information for the things that you've heard.
Questions, thoughts?
Well, I think that, quite frankly, the idea of a town manager has always been on the plate. Some people have raised the question of a mayor. My problem with that is first of all, a 2-year term, but conflict between the political side of the mayor and the management of the town. And I came saying, and I've outlined that in my thoughts, that we're looking at a town manager form of government with the town council. So I think talking about electing a mayor is a lot of wasted time for us.
Caroline?
In response to that, these guys were talking about the possibility of 3 years or picking a different term, 4 years for a mayor. And in terms of the messiness potentially of running the government while also being a political animal. With a mayor, you would be hiring a town administrator. Who would
That
be,
would be the mayor. That's the administrator.
I thought I understood that there would be a kind of COO or a town administrator if there were a mayor. Is that true?
Not necessarily. There are some communities that have a position called like a CAFO, a Chief Administrator and Financial Officer. It's kind of an administrative position that sort of runs the internals, I guess, of the city. I think in olden times or older times, sometimes a chief of staff or mayor is that position. But I think to the point raised by Curtis is that really the mayor is the driving force behind all of these executive and administrative decisions in that form of government. They're not necessarily, there doesn't have to be conflict, but they're not necessarily aligned in terms of their political interests because they're elected separately from the council. For the town manager / administrator, you know, in some sense, and I don't know if Mel will want to correct me, they kind of work for the council. The council hires them. They have certain fiduciary responsibilities that, you know, may lead to disagreements. But essentially, the council hires them. They report to the council regularly, attend council meetings. I don't know, expand on that if you want to, Mel.
No, true. That's why I'm saying the council manager, depending on the size of the council, if you make it a real big council, it could be a little different. But if it's a normal, you know, medium size to small council, it will work very similar that it does now. The manager is hired by the elected body. They set goals and objectives. They do an annual evaluation. And so I think that's what Anthony's getting at. I didn't mention, but I think it was alluded to, that many mayors, the charter requires them to be the chair of the school committee. And that's where a lot of the power is given to the elected mayor, the elected executive, because that's obviously a very powerful position. That's not required, but I would say most mayors, including Agawam, are by ex officio the chair of the school committee.
And Mel, if I could just add on that, just one other distinction that we didn't touch on during the presentation, and it causes confusion for individuals as they're sort of stepping into the space. As you think about places like Worcester and Cambridge, they use the term mayor, but that person holding that title is actually a counselor, is actually a member of the council, and they don't have the power of a mayor that we think about, or that sort of was outlined in what Mel said. They're really, in many cases, a sort of slightly more powerful member of the council. So it's not so. And those communities do have a city manager, but it's not the same relationship as a separate elected mayor who is the source of executive authority.
I think going back to what I was saying earlier, I think we will be more successful if we work with what's already existing. We've got a town manager. I thought that in the very beginning, we were leaning towards a town manager after reviewing town manager and mayor. So I thought we're already there with town manager. And since we have a town manager, it's one thing we don't have to discuss as we're presenting a town council form of government to Nantucketers. So what we can keep the same if it's working, let's try to do that. So town manager seems to make sense, I thought.
Okay, so the prospect of electing someone who's why I agree with Curtis means that you have to have a group or an elite that you're choosing from. And it's just hard enough as one Nantucket to get a selection of people who want to be the mayor. And I agree that it's gonna become overly politicized. And it's kind of hard enough, the role of town manager, just to avoid that because you get sucked into it. So just to give them a little bit of concrete, like we have to go through the council if you're gonna get fired. It's probably just enough. And I just think that wasting up, we are wasting that time.
If I could add to that, I think when the gentleman from Barnstable spoke, he really focused on how much expertise is important when you're electing someone who's basically town manager versus, as you're saying, Bo, someone who's bent towards political parties and agendas and so forth. But you have to have maybe an MBA, maybe engineering degree, as that gentleman does in Barnstable, if I remember. So you're looking for someone who's very well equipped and educated to run Nantucket.
Yeah, I mean, I think I agree, kind of just a few points that I think with the town manager, it gives the town council the best opportunity to recruit the most qualified individual and not always who the most popular individual is. And I think that, you know, especially on an island that presents challenges like that, finding someone that provide that expertise and stability is always critical. And I also think too, you know, kind of looking at the part that they put forward. And I think town manager also gives the opportunity to retain a certain amount of power with the electorate. I don't want to jump ahead to legislative early, but I think if you're talking about things like veto, I think through a council, there's opportunities for the citizens to still create that veto process themselves, their referendum and things like that, or their abilities to challenge a council decision. Where if you're relying solely upon a mayor, you're delegating that authority solely to that one elected individual. I think that's a way to try to keep people engaged in what they are viewing from the legislative lens by giving that executive function to the voters and not to. I'm glad it's fun. I'm glad it's pretty good.
I'd love to hear them.
I mean, I think with it too, to me, it's also, you know, thinking about how the town is structured in the executive branch. I think it's also really critical to have that central leadership that everyone connects to, right? To have the humble feel that everyone knows, not have that fracture around. So at least in my mind's eye, it makes a lot of sense to have all of the departments report to the town manager, whether they're planning natural resources, health, everyone goes to that same central point. And at that point, can interact with the council as requested, or the council can also say, hey, but it gives that central point of reporting and not any sort of fractured approach. I think it provides some better continuity of operations. I think it provides for, again, with a certain level of stability with that. Everyone knows where to go, where to start. To me, it seems to make the most sense. Like mayoral governments get into more political bending and political win. And I think if you have an executive, at least for how I view it, something having someone focused on the best, most efficient operation of the town.
Just a point of clarification, when you say fracturing with a mayor, what, what are you referring to there? In terms of the town administration or operations?
Sure, if I may. So I think fracturing, how I view it today is mayors tend, especially as elected officials, they're obviously connecting to a certain amount of folks that wanted to vote you in, and there's a certain agenda that comes with that. That agenda may not align on with department heads within the town, or what vision has been created by town council for those departments to put forward. And if you're having to adjust that based upon, you know, political ideology instead of necessarily what's the best focus for the town to move forward, that can create internal conflict that really just wastes resources. Stay focused and take that direction as you need through the council and through that solid executive and try to avoid some of that kind of.
Just to add to what Chuck's saying, so think of the department heads as like a competitive group vying for resources. And the town manager is like mom or dad building up the resources, right? And so all the partisanship is in that relationship, right? So if you have a mayor you know, the mayor may go, the mayor may have to establish new partnerships or relationships with various department heads. And so the resource game sort of becomes chaotic. And you can't really plan around it. So with less partisanship, we're like, well, okay, what do we actually need? And how do we avoid the politics of like doling out to various department heads? Or appeasing various department heads because they have a problem, or whatever it is. That's the difference, I think, between mayor and manager. Yeah, a little more continuity, a little less chaos.
Or just to follow on what he's saying, a mayor is also gonna be lobbying for your vote if you're a town employee. So that's the best part about having a town administrator, that they don't have to do that.
I mean, my reaction is, why do we want to have that powerful a chief executive? I mean, we're already, I think the reaction of many of the voters, they say, well, you're either doing away with open town meeting and moving the legislative power to these X number of town councilors. And then if you go to the mayor town council form, I mean, I was surprised. I mean, the mayor, having a veto power, obviously we could not give that to them, but they're elected, they're hard to get rid of. It seemed to me that the balance of power really shifts to the mayor in those towns that have a mayor town council form. I don't see why we need to go there. I mean, it seems to me that
We don't,
the sort of the town manager,
No.
town council would be enough, so to speak. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, I'm just trying to understand the difference as it applies to us, Nantucket. And I appreciate everything everyone said. But I think I'm understanding that with the mayor, since they're 2 years or 3 years, and they, they're political animals, so they may or may not get voted back in. I mean, they're shifting around more, whereas the town manager, they are professional, they've been trained to do that, and so they stick around longer. The mayor would probably, a town manager sticks around longer than a mayor, I would assume. Therefore, there's that continuity that you were talking about, Bo.
Yes. And no, like they could be doing a bad job and the town council would say, well, you're fired. I mean, you just have to go through these people in order for them to say, well, you're doing a good job. And I think, yes, well, you have less chaos in terms of like getting elected because you have to appease various members of the population to get elected. And so you have, I think it's just less chaotic in that sense.
I was just gonna clarify, Joe, I'm sorry, I was just gonna clarify that we don't have any great data that compares tenure between town managers and mayors. It's a mixed bag. The one in Agawam was a very popular mayor, was there for many terms. And of course, you've heard about managers who aren't all that successful and, don't last for too long. But generally speaking, there tends to be a little bit more continuity with the manager and building a team. Typically, the manager terms are 3 years, and so we could do some additional analysis, but I would not agree that there is demonstrable data that would suggest one or the other. Pat, are you familiar with anything that would provide that?
No, I'm not. I don't think they've done any studies on it, but anecdotally, we found, like Mel said, it's really a mixed bag about lengths of terms. The difference is that with a mayor position, an election is coming, and you know when the election is coming every certain number of years. With the manager, there is the contract that may be for 3 years. Oftentimes it either rolls over automatically, or you do know when that is up, but there's not a complete unknown, like as in when there's an election.
If I might just offer a soundbite, a mayor is vote driven. a town manager is project driven. They've got to do X, Y, and Z. They have to do, address a water issue. It's all project driven. It's not driven by the next election.
I was gonna say about the same thing. I was gonna say to me, that town manager position is performance based. Where the mayor one is based on the election and not performance based. The same thing.
And if I might just add, we already have a town manager. The more that we have that's similar to what's going on now in the government, the more successful we'll be and persuaded people that this is, a shift. It's not going to be a seismic earthquake.
So. Does anybody feel that we need to examine the issue of mayor more? I'm not hearing that there's a heck of a lot of enthusiasm for
No.
the mayor. The mayor council form as opposed to the town manager form. No,
And I was.
I know that,
No, and I appreciate our conversation about it because I didn't know. I just wanted to play it out and see. Because I don't agree with Donna. I think we're looking to see what would be better. And yeah, sure, there are certain things we want to map on for efficiency. I'm not sure if this one, I wasn't sure if this one is or isn't. I've heard lots of very persuasive things, so I can move on, but I do think we should talk about stuff just to see how it fits Nantucket, because after all, that's what we're supposed to do.
just to turn around, do you feel that there is advantages to having a mayor?
Well, I actually don't want to waste time, but I'm sitting here thinking, of course, it's good to have stability and it's not good to have chaos like that. Those are driving priorities in my mind. But the ability for the way that it has been now, the politics in the last couple of years have created an instability in the community. And the town manager, very interesting to hear from the Collins Center that the town manager is probably part of that organization, and she takes an oath to be nonpartisan, and she does a very good job at that. But that creates, it's not a vacuum, but it is a neuter in a place where sometimes with all this divisiveness that's really, I think, been extremely toxic for our community and several different, key issues that we've talked about. I wonder how that's affected Nantucket, and I wonder what it would have been like to have somebody who could have afforded to be a little bit more political to help move us back towards stability in an executive fashion, like a CEO. So that's why I wanted to play it out and hear what people's thoughts were.
Well, I think in terms of managing government, we're talking about operations on a town manager for a minute. So you're really talking about a narrow view. And as far as politics go, like, if there's an issue that's complicated, partisan, and let's just take STRs. Well, the town managers gonna pitch, they're gonna release it, right? And they don't really have an opinion. Probably shouldn't, because all they're gonna do is just release it. And that's kind of the way that when I was working in the fire department, we didn't have positions on things. We just were like, this is work. This is just more work for us to do. And that's it. So, in terms of that, like, I don't think they touch that. They're not gonna leave. Now the council, like, the council will be front and center on hard issues. And I think that's where, in terms of leadership, I think that's what.
I think to build on that a little bit, I think that's one of the issues that we heard in the right is under the proposal we have, to kind of consolidating that executive function to which we kind of talked about too at the end there. But right now, it's really important to remember that our executive function is broken essentially into 6 non-equal pieces, because the select board is our executive branch and we have a town manager. And sometimes those don't all align. And you have that, whether it's internal discussion or in public for how that goes, is you're asking that executive function to be handled by a collective and not by a singular entity that reports back to the legislative on a timely basis, right? Our legislative branch puts it up once a year. That's why it's the thing of what's going on, but you know, it's one of those things where, you know, you can kind of looking at those example of STRs. I don't necessarily think that leadership is incumbent upon the town manager, who's going to be asked to, like, we're going to put the rules together, the legislative is going to pass it, you have to figure out how to do it. And make sure that if we delegate that authority to the health department, that they have the resources they need to enact whatever, that's their goal, not to bring that together. That's very difficult task to do. More, I guess, my opinion, more of a select board task, but that's even a very unfair task for them.
Jeremy, you have a comment?
I think all the arguments away from a politicized mayor have great merit. But I think there is one issue that this group should actually discuss. And that is, we're going to go from a 5-member select board today with executive power to a 7, a 9, 11-member group that's going to have executive power. So one question I think this group should be prepared to answer is, if we don't go with a mayor, how is that executive power in a much bigger group now going to be wielded? And is it going to accomplish what everybody wants? I think that's the counter argument to all the good arguments that are made here on why in Nantucket you know, an elected mayor may not work, and what we've got is great. But I think we really should just do a little bit of discussion as to this executive authority is now not going to be 5 people, but it's possibly going to be 11 people.
It's
And that is a big
legislative,
difference.
it's not
They're
executive.
not executive.
It's legislative, Jeremy. Legislative,
No,
please.
but if,
They're not doing both.
if you move to a town manager and a council, as I understand it, the council has executive and legislative authority.
No.
Nope.
I don't think that's the case. Anthony or Mel, can you help clarify this?
I will, you know, clearly in the town form of government, they are shared executive. I would say that in the council manager, there's a lot of similar relationships between the council and town manager as there are a select board, but I see their authority more as a legislative with checks and balances as opposed to sharing executive authority. But it's very similar, but I don't consider them the council an executive branch. It's the legislative branch with checks and balances and some control over the town manager.
And the checks and balances, Mel, are things like, you know, whether they get a veto power on certain hiring decisions, or they have to be consulted on certain hiring decisions. But I think compared to open town meeting that we've got today, the town council, as people have commented, is the legislator. The town manager actually gets a few degrees more powerful, since almost all of the administrative and executive functions devolve to the town manager in that form.
Correct.
All right, any other?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I really want to be clear on this point, and I'm not sure I yet understand that. So can I just sink it in for a second? I agree with your point that going from 5 to 7 or 9 or 11, I mean, that's exactly why I'm curious about mayoral. Because I see I think it's a terrible problem right now. I do not think that 5, and yes, it's unfair to ask them to do it, but it's a disaster. That's my opinion. And if we increase that, I don't know what that magic number is. When does it get easier for those amount of people to make decisions like that. And so looking at the one mayoral position does answer it like a CEO. So, but how are you guys? How are you understanding? Curtis, what was your point back to Jeremy? I just wanna.
It's very simple. The council is the legislature. It replaces annual town meeting, which is the legislature. That's it. They hire a professional manager. A mayor is a political office. And as they've said, 2 years at a time, you're running for reelection right away. And I look at Nantucket and say, if we're gonna play with a mayor, I think we're wasting an awful lot of time. But if someone's running for mayor, who's it gonna be? Who's qualified? And how are you gonna even get a qualified person elected?
I had a slightly separate point. And I'm sorry if I'm not, it's obvious. My observation is the select board, as it exists today, does have some executive capability, or at least I think they do. Maybe I'm totally wrong. And when you, what's that?
I think you're correct.
Yeah.
They think
And
they-
so when we move to now a council form of government, where we have an appointed town manager, like Libby is appointed by the select board today. Okay, is the new form of government going to hand over to the appointed town manager in the new form that executive capability that presently resides with the select board? I know it's a little bit meshed together, but I just think that we should, as a group, dissect and explore this so that we're crystal clear in understanding the difference between the legislative, the appointed, and the executive. That's my point, and I just worry that sometimes you not gloss over, we go over some of these things and people will have questions. And maybe it's just my confusion. I'm sorry if it is.
You have a comment?
Basic separation of powers. So, legislature that makes the bylaws. And then you have the executive that carries them out. Okay, so just like Congress, just like the president, basically Congress is telling or creating the laws so that the president can then execute on the laws. But more or less, that's the relationship. And then so if the legislature, which is town council, doesn't like something that the manager is doing, they would have to force trade, basically negotiate various, parts of the budget or other things.
You mean the mayor? The mayor's doing it?
No, manager.
The manager.
Various parts of the budget to get or to throw it out. The town manager. Okay, so it's that simple relationship that what we're talking about here. So there are some executive functions. And right, they're kind of gonna mesh. But separation of these two political entities. Just institutions. So that you have this single function here, legislature, make the bylaws. Okay.
With regard to the number on the select board versus the future in town council of having 7 or 9 or 11, I think that's a better form of democracy. You have more voices to make decisions rather than the number on the select board. So as far as that is concerned, and the other thing, Carolyn, I don't know what I expressed that you didn't agree with, but I do want to state I am a very strong advocate for town council. And I was just trying to explain that we do have some good things in the present Nantucket charter. One is town manager, and we just want to take a few things from that to improve what we have. That was my goal. So,
Sure, Joe.
my objective, thank you.
Well, I'm just saying, I think that's subjective, maybe that's what.
Oh,
Caroline's-
maybe
the
that's it,
things that
yeah.
You think are good and working that you want to carry forward, which would be your argument, that might be your subjective view, where Caroline
Carol-
might be in complete disagreement, and I think that's the divide that.
Yeah, and I think Carolyn's point is, it's very important. We should discuss things. We should satisfy your concerns about what's going on. That's important.
Jill, would you?
I was just gonna, there's always gonna be some gray areas in some spots when we talk through all of these things. So that's gonna be normal. Like the select board does have, they do give out licenses to people. That could be construed, that is an executive function. There are gonna be things like that come up. But for me personally, on the mayor issue, it's a non-starter. I think that's a big popularity contest. It doesn't mean that they're a good political leader. You've got to look to the people you elect to be. Somebody in that group of 5, 7, 9 needs to, probably have some legislative ideas that they want to take forward and they want to get you excited about. And some people are really strong in that area and some aren't. I mean, that's why you want the diversity of the board, I think, and for that number to get a little bigger. And bring that rather than a smaller group, there tends to be a little more groupthink. But that's really where the policies are gonna come from. The town manager has things she needs to get done and that can become political by the council, but that's not why she's doing them. It's like the dump, she's gotta move the dump. That can be political by all of us and but that's not what she's trying to do. She's just trying to come up with a solution to do that. So that's why I don't like the mayor messing with all of that. I kind of do like a lot of the things that we do have now structurally.
Any other comments, thoughts? Good discussion. Anthony, what do we need in terms of sort of staying on plan here? What do we need to do? Do we need to make a decision today? Do we need to, how does this tend to work when you have committees like this?
I
When you
think,
work with committees like this?
yeah, what I would recommend is there's been a full discussion amongst the committee. I'd recommend that it take, if debate has sort of has gone through its full process, then, I would suggest that can we take a vote similar to the vote that it took a few weeks ago to say you'd like to move forward with drafting, and we would draft language, whether it's mayor or town manager. And then the decision points that Pat talked about, we could put those in that language and that's something that the body could look at. And we can go through each of those provisions at the next meeting on those decision points. For example, in terms of the mapping, I'll just share my screen. I'm just giving you an example about what it could be if you, let's assume you move forward with a town manager. I think that there's some of these provisions that are currently in the select board provision that we might not suggest map over to to a town manager if that's what you did, particularly this power to acquire real estate. Again, we haven't talked about this. I'm just saying that is something unusual for this select board, and I don't know if it's something that we'd recommend for a town manager. But areas around the appointment authority. We could draft some language around the appointment of personnel, going to the town manager, and then you could have a discussion about the oversight or the checks and balances you want on that. Would you like those to then be approved by the town council, or would you like the town council to affirmatively approve them or have the ability to stop them? Removal authority, some of those other areas that we talked about in the when we went through the exemplar charter. So the short answer is, whether it's today or at a future meeting, I think the vote would be which avenue would you like to go forward with, town manager or mayor?
Does anybody feel we need more discussion on the issue of mayor versus town manager?
I move that we move forward on the town manager form of town council, town manager form of government.
You have a second?
So
Okay. The motion on the table is to move forward with the town manager, town council form. Start with you, Rachel.
Aye.
Bo? Jeff?
Yes.
Caroline?
Abstain just because I could value more conversation, but I'm generally in favor.
Chris?
I can't,
Oh, I'm sorry, Donna, my bad.
but yes.
I vote aye. So, alrighty, I think that's, pretty good, progress for this afternoon. Any other comments before the committee, before we adjourn?
Just a clarification. We're going to work on
Yeah, we're with you.
organizing.
Yeah, I have the list of 32. We'll talk and
Oh, we'll talk. Okay, so
we
Curtis
So if
and
you
I,
want to be a subcommittee on that, if you would
yes,
converse in between meetings and report back next time.
yes,
That'd be
definitely.
great.
Okay, very good.
Oh, I'm sorry, we did a public comment. Do you have a question or a comment or just
Yeah,
listening?
Yeah, I just wanted to sit here for fun. No, I actually did come in for public comment. It's still the same public comment from Lasco, regarding discussing, all department heads falling under the town manager. I know it was discussed at town meeting that this was the place to come to for that discussion, so I'm back here again. Just wondering when that, might be an appropriate time to discuss it, put it on an agenda. It briefly came up, so glad I
Well,
came to the meeting.
as you know, I mean, the NEMPDC is a sort of a complicated part of the town's administrative structure.
Yes,
And we will, if you want to come to all the meetings, that's great, but if you want to watch the agenda, sooner or later, that will come up as a discussion. Well, just like the Nantucket is a county and a town, we're gonna have to talk about that as well, so.
Curtis
We-
is dying to talk about that.
it was offered to come to the meeting, so I figured I would show up, so.
Well, thank you for coming.
nice to
and,
have some company.
we will definitely be talking about it.
Joe, I had a comment.
Oh, sure, Janet, fire away.
I've worked for Mike Kozort when the intermediate school was being built, and I have a list of the community organizations that he contacted at that time. Would that be helpful to you?
Terrific.
Fantastic, absolutely.
Do you have an email address?
Send it to Joe.
joe.grouse@gmail.com.
I'm sorry, say that again?
JOE,
Joe Grouse.
GoGrouse@gmail.com.
Okay, I'll get it off this afternoon.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I will say that from the communications we've had with the Nantucket Civic League, we put it out there when we talked to them, I think it was 2 months ago, hey, we're planning, we want to try to outreach in summer. And we just have not heard from, except for when we went on Saturday, you were contacted by one other person, but there hasn't been an impetus to line that up. And I don't know if that's resistance or that they've already got their other speakers, or maybe because a lot of them aren't
I mean,
voters.
I've certainly sent Charlie and Peter Morrison a couple of emails, and they've said, oh, they're more than willing to have us talk to their constituent groups. I'm not quite sure how to contact any of these HOAs directly.
We'll try to figure
Well,
something
there's
out.
actually that list in the street list has the contact and the emails of all the leaders.
Well, then we could certainly shoot them all a direct email and say, the management of the senior executives of the Civic League, more than happy to have us talk to you. Is there a good date this summer? So.
I am already booked with the Sconset Civic Association with the police chief, which means I'm gonna really be second banana to her because she's good. And then I'm doing the Tom Nevers group with Randy Bringer. He's reached out to me after Saturday.
And you're doing Brant Point Association with me.
If you'll allow me.
Yes, no, I
Oh.
invited you. You said you were coming,
Do I
but
get-
the police chief will be there too, so you'll have second fiddle again.
No,
Maybe
you're
third.
in charge. I'm backing you at Grant Point.
Oh,
We'll be pairs.
All right,
nice.
Anthony, Mel, and Patricia, thank you for your time and your presentation today. If you send that stuff along, I'll circulate it to the committee. And we'll have our usual Monday debrief on Monday. All right.
Yes.
Can I have a motion to adjourn, please?
So moved.
Becca?
Second.
All right, Jill,
Aye.
Hi.
Curtis, Caroline?
Hi.
Jeff? Aye. Bo? Rachel?
Aye.
Joe? Aye. Thank you, everybody.
Oops.